What a week in American politics and in the media. Joe Biden betrays Israel. RFK Jr. had a brainworm, and Kristi Noem finally, thankfully, finishes that book tour. But is the damage already done? Well, we'll ask the panel. Communications guru Sarah Selip, founder of 917 Strategies, Vice President of Americans for Prosperity Akash Chougule, and Senior Vice President of the Association of Mature American Citizens, Andy Mangione. My name's Larry O'Connor, and it's time for the Roundtable. In a truly stunning move, President Joe Biden not only reversed his own personal policies that he's been articulating for decades, but he also reversed American policy, well, for over 70 years, and that is our ironclad support of the state of Israel. He has delayed weapons shipments while they are in the middle of an existential war with the terrorists, the very terrorists that not only slaughtered 1,200 of their countrymen, but continue to hold their people hostage and Americans hostage. Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, appeared on Salem News Channel's This Week on the Hill, and here's what he had to say about it.
And after initially denying the reports, the president himself admitting this week that he has been blocking the shipment of much needed munitions to Israel. You see this as a big problem.
Well, just imagine how Sinwar feels right now. The guy's in a tunnel surrounded by Israel, and he's the guy that, executed the plan of October the 7th. He's got to be feeling pretty good. The only reason they're not dancing in Iran is they don't believe in dancing. This is a strategic blunder. It's put all the terrorists on steroids, and it's really deflated our friends in Israel, and it will not stand without pushback. Here's why they need the weapons now. Hezbollah is aimed at 100,000 rockets aimed at Israel. That's a radical Shiite terrorist group bent on the destruction of Israel. Iran, the great Satan, writes on its missiles, death to Israel. Hamas says, I'll do it again, I'll do it again, I'll do it again. Their goal is to destroy all the Jews, not help the Palestinians. They're surrounded on three fronts. On a single day, they were attacked by all three. And our response is we're going to withhold bombs as you try to destroy the last 4 battalions. Now, why is this a problem? Hamas puts command centers under hospitals. They store weapons in schools. They fire rockets behind mosques. They make it hard for Israel not to kill the Palestinian people because they use them as shields, Hamas does. So Israel needs the weapons. This is Pearl Harbor and 9/11 on steroids. October the 7th is for the state of Israel. Their very being is in question. After we were attacked in Pearl Harbor, we fought the Germans and the Japanese, and we dropped 2 atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war because we were a fight for our lives and the future of mankind. Give Israel what they need and give it to them now. What Biden's done is obscene, it's wrong, it's dangerous. It makes the war go on longer. Iran's got to be emboldened. And if I'm Israel, do what you got to do.
Now, Andy, recently, a politician said that it would be unthinkable to cut off military funding to Israel. That politician was Joe Biden. This obviously is a political calculation. How's it sitting with the good members of AMAC?
It doesn't sit well with the members of AMAC. Joe Biden's, this is a foreign policy disaster. I think it's easy for everybody to recognize that. But importantly, I think this could end up being a case study in a foreign policy graduate program for how not to treat a trusted ally. American voters, including AMAC members, recognize this disaster and will remember it in November.
And Akash, this is, again, it's a political calculation, but also strategically, I want to repeat, Hamas is still holding Americans hostage. This undermines any negotiating opportunity or leverage that we have or the state of Israel has to try to release those hostages because you're giving them something without getting anything.
That's right. It makes us look weak on the world stage, but there's a broader lesson here, which is that President Biden has been beholden to radical progressive activists since the day that he became president, and we've seen it unfold in dozens and dozens of issues. The difference is caving to radical progressive activists and college campus agitators on this issue means abandoning an ally, abandoning hostages, and making America and our allies around the world less safe. These are the same people who not only slaughtered 700 Israelis, but after that were chanting death to Israel, death to America. And so Biden caves to radicals over and over again, but this time he's putting American lives at risk and frankly saying that he's done, worrying about these hostages, which is shameful and something, to Andy's point, Americans will remember in November. I think the backlash to this goes well beyond many of the other crises that have been raging around this administration.
Yeah, and Sarah, from a comm standpoint, from a messaging standpoint, from a imaging standpoint, this just comes days after we've seen Ivy League campuses and other college campuses taken over by pro-Hamas occupiers. They had to be cleared out by the police. American people supported clearing them out. This looks like Joe Biden is giving them exactly what they wanted.
He's giving them exactly what they wanted. But the funny thing is, if you look at Joe Biden's week, just this week alone, he on Tuesday was giving a speech for Holocaust Remembrance Day and said that we need to just stop all of the anti-Semitism. It's disgusting. It's plaguing our country. But then he withholds the ammunition necessary. So it's really fascinating when you see Lindsey Graham asking the Joint Chiefs of Staff Brown and Lloyd Austin about it this week and asking, would it have been okay for Nagasaki and Hiroshima? I mean, it ended the war. And they said, yeah, it ended the war. So why are you not giving the Israelis what they need to finish the job? They're one of our long-term allies, and we need to get it done. It's making Joe Biden look weaker and weaker and weaker.
That's right. And I don't remember American government or the American president paying heed to those who were concerned about civilian deaths in Iraq or in Afghanistan when we went after Al-Qaeda or when we went after ISIS. You got terrorists, you get the job done. Sarah, let me just quickly follow up because of Lindsey Graham. Again, you're good at working with politicians, communications-wise, language. He always has a good line. You know, they're not dancing in the streets in Iran because they don't believe in dancing. Does he come up with this stuff, or does he have a team of people? What do you think?
I really think it's him. Same with John Kennedy from Louisiana. They're just one-liners. They're smart as all get out, but at the same time, they know what to sell. And the fact that he went on Sinclair and was talking about it, and the fact that we're talking about his one-liners, I mean, it proves that he's just kind of a witty guy.
Yeah, and he's always willing to do an interview if it means he can promote selling more arms overseas. That seems to be
Yes.
the senator's goal. Akash, let me swing it back to you because you just said the American people will remember this on Election Day. Obviously, this is political calculation. Conventional wisdom in D.C. is this is about Michigan. This is about a very strong part of the population in the suburbs of Detroit, Dearborn in particular, who are very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. By accommodating that voting bloc, does President Biden run the additional risk of alienating so many voters who support Israel, Jewish voters in certain states that might actually end up hurting him? Is this a boomerang effect?
It does, but I actually think the premise is a little flawed, Larry, which is that people assume Biden's doing this because he wants to win Dearborn, Michigan, and Michigan's a swing state. He's not doing this, and the people in his staff, his White House, the radical woke activists, they're not doing this because of Dearborn. They're doing it because of their peers, which are the people that Sarah alluded to, those woke radical activists on college campuses. That's who is driving the bus in this administration, driving the bus behind these policy decisions. We see it on economic policy, social policy. We see it over and over and over again. They might think there's a political calculus here for Michigan and Dearborn, places like that. But the real impetus, the real, kind of emphasis behind decisions like this is coming from, frankly, woke activists inside the White House, inside the Democratic Party. But to your point, ultimately what he's doing is alienating large groups of people who have historically been reliable Democratic voters, Jewish voters, Black voters, Hispanic voters, what have you, depending on what the issue is. I think this instance is no different. Biden is not winning over any friends because those people who are pro-Hamas and anti-Israel, you're never going to do enough to really win them over. And in the process, you're alienating people who should be in your voting base. It's a lose-lose, and frankly, he deserves to lose.
Hey, Larry?
On this issue because of these decisions.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I just had a thought. Biden could also be doing this. One element could be he wants to avoid mass violent protests at the DNC convention in Milwaukee. He might be trying to head that off at the pass.
Maybe, but you saw that big light display at George Washington University, and they were calling him, what was it, Bloody Biden or something like that. I mean, that's the thing. He's alienating both sides of it. Mm-hmm. And listen, this is the problem. When you don't actually stand for values and principles that have been your guiding light and moral compass for your political career, and it seems like every move you make is a calculation to just advance your own personal political ambitions, well, then you end up alienating everyone in the long run. And that's really who Joe Biden has always been. Millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards, and corporate megastores want to take those rewards away. We're talking about the rewards you use on groceries and school supplies, cash back to save on gas and grow our small businesses, travel miles that we use to make memories. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill is going to eliminate those credit card rewards. Tell your senator to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com to take action today. That's handsoffmyrewards.com. There's a brand new Marist poll out that shows that independent voters, last I checked, that's a pretty important voting block, independent voters think that it's Joe Biden who poses the greater threat to American democracy and the democratic process than Donald Trump. And while this news did not sit well with a certain panel over on a certain network with a peacock in their logo.
Another thing interesting in this polling was more independents said that they worry about President Biden weakening democracy than Trump, 53% to 42%. What do you make of this?
I find it shocking, honestly. I can't, make sense of that number. I wish I could. I wish I had some really great insight to it. But I don't know if it's an outlier or not, because the other numbers with independents and Biden are going in the right direction. So that may be it. But also, just one thing I wanted to add on to what Basil said. This trial's not on TV. You guys do a great job reporting what's happening. But if there aren't those images coming out of the courthouse, people feel like they know this story. We've heard about it for a long time. So it doesn't surprise me that they're not interested.
Well, thank you both so much for being here, Basil.
They're so sad. Sarah, this, of course, is framed within the context of the trial up in Manhattan. And it seems like people already know the story. Yes, because you've been telling us about it for 8 years and it made no impact then. Are you surprised that they're surprised that all of this coverage of the Trump trials isn't having the impact they were hoping for?
It's all made for TV. It's just like the January 6th hearings. Everything is just made, produced. And it's funny that they're, freaking out because it's not going in their favor anymore. They're trying to shove Donald Trump to do the basement strategy that Joe Biden won, but it's just not Trump's MO. And people believe that Trump can actually come out and win no matter what, because he is who he is. He stands for what he stands for, and he stands for Americans. Joe Biden stands for himself, and his social media team stands to put out horrible messaging, things on the economy. So you're looking at realism versus this entire fake narrative, dystopian mindset that CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, have.
Yeah, I mean, we even saw Hillary Clinton with Morning Joe this week saying, "Don't you understand the threat to our democracy?" Akash, they certainly can't talk about what a great economy we've got. So this is what they have, but it just isn't sticking the way conventional wisdom in DC thought it would.
It is the boy who cried wolf. People are so tired of this. Even if you think President Trump did some things that were concerning and you don't like, obviously, the way January 6th unfolded, it was a horrible day. Even if you're concerned about that and you have strong opinions, the media has been shoving it down our throats for 10 years. You're going to get tired of it eventually. Nothing made them more disappointed than when he left office and their viewership went down because they didn't have him to talk about anymore. And I actually think there's a broader point here, Larry, which is not just on President Biden, but the Democratic Party in general, which is that the actual assaults on democracy that we're seeing that are part of the Democratic platform that candidates are running on every day go way beyond President Biden. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to abolish the Electoral College. They want to, abolish the Senate, depending on who you're asking, right? So much of the Biden agenda is being rammed down our throats through unconstitutional executive orders and regulations that overstep the will of Congress because Congress won't enact their agenda. These are genuine attacks on our democracy, on our democratic republic. I think people see that this administration, this party, this movement, they're all about ramming their agenda down our throats, even though the American people are rejecting it and fundamentally altering our government in order to do so. That's a real threat to democracy, and I think people see that.
Well, you're right about that threat to the democracy, but also, Andy, the irony here that clearly these guys on MSNBC can't pick up on, we're giving you wall-to-wall coverage of Democrats trying to convict and jail the Republican nominee for president, Donald Trump, using a law that has never been applied before in any way whatsoever. Why do they think we're the threat to democracy? I mean, they literally are doing something so unprecedented. Clearly, they are the ones who are a threat to our process because, I don't know, there's tens of millions of people who would like to vote for Donald Trump.
Hey, Larry, I wonder what day it is. in a lefty's world. I really do. This just shows how detached from the reality of living in Biden's America leftist pundits and leftist journalists truly are. Real Americans are faced with making ends meet. They're faced with hostile campuses that support terrorists and insane foreign policy. Real Americans know who the real threat to democracy is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also, I want to go back around the table here, starting with you, Andy, on that point, because, listen, I disagree with Democrats, but up until about 10 years ago, they really did stand for ideas I disagreed with, but they stood for ideas and policies. Now, if you think about what the Democrats stand for, it really just boils down to stopping Trump. Whatever Trump is for, we're against. And that's not really how you build a robust political party or an important debate that we should be having in this country.
Exactly right. There's no consensus in that thinking. I would add that their mission is to destroy America and remake it in whatever warped image they want to, a Marxist, socialist image that people are rejecting wholesale. And then when the media reports on it, they get the people get scolded for not reacting the way that the media wants them to.
Yeah, Akash, back to you on that, because the message that we're going to hear, and we're going to continue to hear it, is Trump's a threat to democracy. This could be the last election we have. Meanwhile, Trump's going to run on, I'm going to keep the tax cuts going. I'm going to reduce regulation. I'm going to get our economy back in a robust way, the way it was before these guys took over. I mean, I'm biased, but I think one's a much more positive message.
One's a much more positive message, and one's a lot more connected to the concerns of everyday Americans that Andy's talking about. You're not only concerned about the direction of the country, right, and our founding principles and things like that. And like I said, independents might have legitimate concerns about both of these candidates when it comes to kind of these high-minded values. But at the end of the day, can you make ends meet? Are your kids safe? What's going on in your kids' school? These are the things people make decisions off of. And if Joe Biden and Democrats refuse to talk about that, and all they're talking about is Dobbs and democracy, then lots of people who voted against Donald Trump in 2020 are going to be open to voting for him in 2024 if he's the only one talking about the issues that concern them and their family on a day-to-day basis.
All right, Sarah, back to the queen of comms here. I mean, you make a living literally trying to help fashion messages and get politicians, people running for office or people in office, to stick with a winning message. This threat to democracy that Donald Trump, and by the way, by extension, the people who vote for Donald Trump, remember, this is always a talking point attacking the people who support Donald Trump. This threat to democracy thing, is it sticking? Is it gonna stick? Are they gonna stick with it through the election?
I don't think so. If you think about what we've seen for the past year, just even with campaign season, we're past the basement thing. Joe Biden is forced to be in front of people. He's just saying empty words that people on his team writes out for him. But when it comes to the Democrats' messaging, they don't really care about the ideas anymore as they care about screaming things in your face. There's this concept called the heckler's veto, which is when two groups are next to each other, just yelling the same thing louder and louder to see who can yell it the loudest. And that's what the Democrats are doing. It's, we hate Trump. We hate the economy. He did so much bad. It's always orange man bad after all of these years. But Americans want to hear about the economy. They want to hear about the border. They want to talk about the kitchen table issues that are affecting them every single day. We're so sick of hearing 4 words, Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. Just leave this sham trial behind, get to campaigning so it sets us up in 2028 for a fresh set of candidates. Otherwise, we're just going to repeat this cycle all over again.
One more quick one-word answer from each of you, because the idea of Biden debating Trump came up again. Biden said a couple of weeks ago, we talked about here on the roundtable, that, yeah, he'd love to debate Trump. This week, a reporter said, when are you going to debate Trump? And Biden said, set it up. Sarah, you think this is going to happen?
Depends if it's after his bedtime.
And Andy?
Gosh, I hope so.
Akash?
I do. People will demand it.
I don't think it's going to happen. There's no way. They would sooner get a new candidate in there than run the risk of having Biden up there for 90 minutes with Donald Trump. Millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards. We love them. We use them to earn miles so that we can travel to see our loved ones. We get cash back so we can save on gas or expenses for our small businesses. Here comes the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. It's going to eliminate those credit card rewards. No more travel miles, no more cash back. When lawmakers help corporate megastores line their pockets, American families pay for it. Tell your senator to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. Go to handsoffmyrewards.com. That's handsoffmyrewards.com. The networks keep pulling this election coming up in November as a two-man race, Trump versus Biden. I don't know why they do that. This is not a two-man race. This is at least a three-man race, if not a five-person race. The other candidates, Cornel West, Jill Stein, and of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And there's a lot of speculation about who those people help or hurt come election day. Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. appeared this week and was asked point blank where he stood on the issue of abortion. Take a look.
But so to leave, so in other words, keeping it as is with Roe versus Wade having been overturned and leaving it up to the states to determine if and when a woman can have an abortion?
No, I wouldn't leave it to the states.
You wouldn't, right?
No, I would.
You would say completely. It's up to the woman.
My belief is we should leave it to the woman. We shouldn't have government involved,
even if it's full term.
Even if it's full term.
Sage Steele, good job there on her podcast. And y'all, put your shoes on. What's going on here? All right, Sarah, I'll give him this much. At least he's being more honest than the pro-abortion Democrats on this issue, because they try to dodge that. If asked about, well, even full term, oh, nobody's asking for full term. Nobody wants, nobody's saying full term. Or they'll just continue to repeat over and over again, I just want to return to Roe v. Wade. I want to return to Roe v. Wade. At least he's saying it. But is that a winning message?
Absolutely not. Look what happened with Terry McAuliffe in 2019, where he said, I support full-term abortion, even after the baby's born, just, end the life. But again, this is one of those things for RFK Jr., where we have no idea what he's thinking about anything at any time. There's a difference between being an independent and not having a stance on anything. And it just feels with this campaign that he just keeps flip-flopping if he's a Democrat, if he's an independent, if he's a libertarian, if he's et cetera, et cetera. So it's nice to see that he has an issue, but it's not going to land with voters at this point. We need to know what he's thinking.
Again, I give him points for honesty, Andy, but it's very rare for a politician to come out and say that at this day and age.
Absolutely. And I wonder if Republicans, these Republican never-Trumpers who would never vote for the bad orange man, will compare RFK Jr.'s stance, this extreme stance on abortion, with Trump's mean tweets. Now, you mentioned earlier, Larry, does this help or hurt Biden? And I think it hurts him. I think that there's some extreme Democrat leftists, or they're kind of the same thing, who believe that Biden doesn't go far enough on abortion. And hearing what RFK Jr. just said, that could drive them to him. And on the other side, these never-Trump Republicans could be shocked with this extreme, gruesome stance on abortion, and all of a sudden they might consider the bad orange man.
Yeah, that really is the critical question, Akash. And you watch this stuff, you watch the polls. This is a big part of what you got to do to be able to push policies, is to know where the American people are and how they might vote. I still hear from some people, smart people in this town, that think RFK Jr. is going to hurt Trump more than Biden. But I don't see Trump voters going his way after this kind of messaging on that issue.
Well, I think that some of that remains to be seen. He certainly has said things, to Sarah's point, that appeal to factions on both sides, right? Some of the stuff on vaccines and the anti-establishmentarianism might appeal to some Trump people. He obviously is super, super progressive on this issue. And so I think it remains to be seen who he pulls from. I would not say with definitive assurance that he's going to pull more from one or the other. I think what this really demonstrates is just how frustrated the country is with these two mainstream candidates that the parties have nominated. I mean, 4 days ago, Nikki Haley just got 22% in Indiana. She dropped out of the race 2 months ago and was out of contention long before that. I think that's what RFK represents more than anything, is that people dislike both of these candidates, and ultimately it will be one of these two that becomes president. But as far as choosing which one he's going to draw more from, I think he chooses his words very carefully, to Sarah's point, that he's done enough to appeal to fringes on both sides that I don't know if we're really going to have an answer to that before November.
Well, and actually, to that point, in this same news cycle, on an interview with MSNBC, he would not rule out giving pardons to some of the people convicted from January 6th. And I know that issue raises emotions for a lot of people, Akash, but I do think polling shows that the majority of Americans think that there's quite a few people who have been jailed unjustly, because they literally, were just walking through a door held open by a Capitol police officer. So maybe is that one of those issues where he's sort of playing both sides here?
Yeah, absolutely. He's doing this anti-establishmentarianism, and it applies to both sides. Again, January 6th was a horrible day that the vast majority of Americans rightfully think was beyond, acceptable content. I think to make that something that is like a major portion of your campaign, or even something that you emphasize, you're obviously doing that very intentionally, right? RFK is doing that because he wants to try to peel off Trump voters. He does things on the left because he wants to try to peel off Democratic voters. If that's his entire strategy, I mean, it could certainly make the difference one way or another in the election. But I think it's just sort of a, it's an interesting and odd way to run a presidential campaign. And it doesn't really give America the contrast of visions that we deserve between two major political parties to choose who our next president is going to be.
But Andy, he is running an odd campaign. I will give him that. But Andy, he's a Kennedy. And I'll tell you, and especially membership of AMAC, whether it's the younger members who have fond memories of Teddy Kennedy when he wasn't, assaulting waitresses allegedly in Washington, or RFK's dad, Bobby Kennedy, or JFK. I mean, there is something about that name. And when you look at him, it's like, yeah, he's a Kennedy. That actually goes places with some voters. Is it working?
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I believe the Kennedy name has absolutely no cachet with AMAC members. I just don't think it's what it used to be. That coupled with the fact that RFK Jr.'s family turned on him. And when you talk about RFK Jr. talking about pardoning the J6, some J6 people that are in jail, it sounds like pandering when it comes from him. And I think folks will see through that. And if President Trump is successful, I think they sincerely believe that he would actually follow through with that promise.
Sarah, when you're working on a campaign, you never know what the news cycle is going to bring you and what old story about your candidate might come up. This week, I never thought I'd see this kind of headline, but it was revealed that RFK Jr. admitted under oath years ago during a divorce proceeding that a doctor had found that a worm had been in his brain and had died there after eating a portion of his brain. How do you handle that talking point?
You don't. You just let it go. I mean, honestly, of course that's going to resurface. It's wild, it's weird, and it changed the narrative a little bit away. But at the same time, what credit does that give him? It's funny, we're all talking about it. There are tons of memes, but it's like beyond that, what kind of standing does it give him? Are we supposed to feel bad for his dead brain worm? It just doesn't make any sense. And actually, circling back, because the other guys made a really good point about January 6th, this just kind of proves how empty-minded the campaign is as a whole. So maybe there's a brain worm in the campaign. See what I did there? Anyways, it was fascinating because the January 6th thing came about with the pardoning. It came about because the campaign sent out a fundraising email from Team Kennedy about pardoning the January 6th protesters. And after a lot of people asked to comment on it, the spokesperson for the campaign said, and I quote, "The statement that we sent out about the January 6th protesters, their liberties, everything like that, does not reflect Mr. Kennedy's views. It was inserted by a new marketing contractor and slipped through the normal approval process."
Oh, man.
That's a big thing. So nobody's thinking. And at least the brain worm kind of just adds a little bit more credit to that.
Geez, that also came on the heels of somebody whoever's running the social media account on behalf of RFK Jr. erroneously tagged Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin and mislabeling him as the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Not a good week for the Kennedy campaign there. And I will say this about the Kennedy brainworm story. It allowed smartasses like me to say Joe Biden also had a brainworm, but it died of starvation. Well, Kristi Noem has canceled her book tour. She said it was because of bad weather. Apparently, it was raining cats and dogs. But one of the interviews she survived barely through occurred on News Nation. This one had nothing to do with poor Cricket who got shot by Governor Noem. No, this had to do with a story that apparently never happened, where then Congresswoman Noem met with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Now, her messaging had been, as soon as I saw that was in the book, we got rid of it because the ghostwriter put it in and it slipped through the cracks. But then this happened.
You said when you learned of it, you immediately took action. You recorded the whole book and the audiobook. You read this whole passage out loud. Why didn't you take it out then when you read the audiobook? I've traveled for years. I've been involved in policy for almost 30 years. And so I've gone all across the world. I've met with world leaders.
So you didn't realize when you recorded the audiobook?
When it was brought to my attention, and I asked the publisher if they would remove the name, and they did.
So Sarah, I'm sure, I don't know. Were you enjoying watching this, or were you having like post-traumatic stress disorder, imagining this was one of your clients going through this? Because I mean, you're confronted with the obvious logical fallacy of your talking point. It's like, what do you mean it was brought to your attention? You recorded the audio book, but she stuck to the talking point. She stuck with the messaging. I mean, are you impressed with the discipline, or are you just crying your eyes out on this one?
I have almost thrown a chair more than once about this. It's absolutely berserk. And actually, while you were playing the clip, I looked to my side. I have 3 different manuscripts from my clients that are coming out this year. I have gone through dozens of manuscripts printed for the same client for the same book. You can't blame the editor. She keeps blaming the editor. The process is just absurd at this point. It's a joke. And she's lost so much credibility. It's hurting her image and everything like that. But at the same time, you just have to think like, sure, she's being disciplined, but to what talking points? Like, where are the talking points? Where's the media prep? I could go on and on about this. I mean, you've seen my Twitter, but at the same time, this is a mess. Pull her out of the interviews, tell her to take a step back, and let RFK's brainworm story just keep going and going.
Well, the brainworm did. I mean, we had a lot of critters in the news this week, from the dead dog to the brainworm, and the worm seems to have eclipsed now Kristi Noem's story. But Akash, I'm so torn about this. It is a fascinating thing to watch unfold before our eyes, mostly because I think she has a lot of goodwill. I think a lot of political observers in this town recognize that she was a good congresswoman, and she's been a pretty good governor for South Dakota. So what to make of this? Is this a result of just an Oedipus thing? Is she flying too close to the sun, or is she handled wrongly?
I mean, ultimately, the buck stops with the candidate, right? Her name, or the lawmaker, her name is the one on the door. We just have to expect and demand better from our lawmakers and our leaders. It's absolutely ridiculous. We have so many incredible Republican governors all around this country, some of whom get the attention they deserve, some of whom don't, right? A lot of them are doing great things. They're cutting taxes, they're expanding school choice, they're advancing the conservative cause. And then you got people like this that give the rest of them a bad name. And then she tries to distract from the story and like throw Nikki Haley under the bus, and then goes on this tour and is like this media tour that's just been an absolute disaster. And then to say that she forgot or she missed it. I mean, meeting Kim Jong-un isn't the same as meeting some state lawmaker in Pierre. Like, that's a very memorable thing that you wouldn't gloss over in reading your book. And so it really is just shameful. It's embarrassing. And if this doesn't take her out of contention for some high-ranking position in the next administration, then I think it looks badly on that next administration, because it certainly should. I think no matter how great of a track record she might have as a member of Congress or as a governor, this has revealed a lot of poor qualities about her.
Yeah, I want to bring up the future in a minute, because she is still talked about as a potential running mate. But Andy, from your perspective here, I mean, this, again, it's been something that we in DC have been talking about because of just the nature of the story. Is this resonating around the country? Do people even notice this?
You know, I think it depends on who you talk to. Lefties and liberals are going to lap this up. But I was speaking to some conservatives, and the general consensus is if the left doesn't like you, they will find something to smear you with or make something up. What surprises me about Governor Kristi Noem was I want to know who advises her. Why put this in the book to begin with? This is like giving the left the stick to beat you with, and I'm surprised that she even disclosed this in a book.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, listen, I was with you. You know, you're right. The left will come up with horrible attacks on you, but she handed this to them on a silver platter. I don't know, Sarah. I'm told that if you're talking about how you killed your dog, there's no way to get out of that story. There's no upside to it. The second you admit, and in this case in the book, kind of brag about the fact that you killed your dog, you're done. Is there a recovery from that one?
No, there's no recovery. And it's really fascinating. If you look at what's been going on in Kristi Noem's image recently, she obviously did that great tour about jobs in South Dakota. And then she goes and makes these really weird influencer style dentist video. And then for whatever reason, her team decides, and I have a lot of respect for her team. I have a lot of friends on it. So I'm saying this as like a comms person, just looking at the situation. But the thing is, when that story came out, the book hadn't been released. They chose this as the excerpt they wanted to put forward.
So it's the ultimate self-inflicted wound, literally. I mean,
Exactly.
they thought this was going to play well.
It doesn't make any sense to me, and especially because how many rounds of edits do even like stories that you put up on town hall go through? You have to have known about it. She gave stories to the ghostwriter if she didn't add them herself, and this is going to kill her chances with the white suburban woman vote, which we already kind of struggle with as Republicans. But
yeah, all right. Let me just throw it out there. I'm stealing this from the guys over at the Ruthless podcast. All right, because I thought they made kind of a witty observation. If you're Donald Trump, you're always thinking outside the box, and you're always thinking about what you really need and what's going to serve you best. What do you value? You value loyalty. You value someone who can do a lot of media. You value someone who will stick to the talking points, even if you have to stick to talking points and go down with a burning, sinking ship. You stay disciplined and you stay on message. From his perspective, an audience of one, could she still be in the running, Sarah?
No. I think with Donald Trump, it comes from he has a giant personality. He wants to be the one to shine here. She's getting a lot of media attention.
Yeah, but
too
she'll
much
make him
media
look good.
attention.
It's not like he killed his dog.
But I don't know. I just
All
don't
right.
think it's the right choice.
Akash, what do you think? Is she? You already sort of mentioned this. Are you saying she's done with like Interior Secretary, even something like that?
I don't know, because Trump doesn't actually have the track record of hiring all the best people that he said. We saw that firsthand, the kind of people he actually hired and fired. But the fact of the matter is that she would make him look bad if he were to elevate her at this point, and Trump will not do anything or thinks he won't do anything that would make him look bad. Hiring her at this point would make him look bad. There are plenty of other good options on the table for him to pick as vice president or cabinet secretary. Some of them are debasing themselves and making themselves look bad in other ways, but this is just beyond the pale. And I think, if he should look beyond this, and I think he probably has.
Andy?
She's expended a lot of political capital to kind of manage, what she said and what she's written in her book. I think this has diminished her value as a viable vice presidential candidate. That, coupled with the fact that there are so many other people that bring a lot to the table, that the bench for VP is very deep, and Trump knows that.
I think that's a great point, especially juxtaposed against the Democrats. The Republican bench, especially if you're drawing from governors, is incredibly deep. Last question just for Sarah, because I'm going to get shallow for a moment, Sarah. It has to do with appearance. Where you mentioned white suburban women voters, and you got to appeal to them. So the cynical thought is, well, you got to have a woman running mate. I look at Kristi Noem here, and to me, based on the white suburban women that I know, that's not actually an appealing look. I mean, she looks beautiful, but I think she appeals more to men than to women, actually. If you're looking for a candidate that might appeal to your average white suburban woman, I think Elise Stefanik is a little more accessible and relatable. What do you think?
I'd even say Nikki Haley, because she's beautiful without it being in your face. This kind of glow up that Kristi Noem's had over the past 10 years, it's too similar to the Kimberly Guilfoyle one, where it's the va-va-voom. And Kristi Noem needs to be taken seriously right now, so she needs to wheel it back. She's not a Fox political analyst, she's a governor. And if she wants credibility here, she needs to just think First Lady-wise and just tone it down, tone it back, take off the lip fillers. Yeah.
The va-va-voom. Is that a technical phrase in your line of business? I like that.
I use a lot of weird things. Have you met me?
No, that's true. It's why we like you. All right, since you threw Nikki out there, I'm going to let the other two really quickly. Andy, Nikki Haley still have a shot after that primary process?
No, I don't think she has a shot. I think she had her moment in the sun, and I think that she doesn't have much left in the tank.
Akash?
I think she has a future outside of anything to do with Donald Trump, and I think there are other good options on the table. Doug Burgum, Katie Britt, that Trump will probably look at a different direction.
Heard. We'll leave it there. Thank you, guys. And we'll just leave it with me and my va-va-voom. Adding to Joe Biden's very, very rough week, he gave a sit down with Aaron Burnett on CNN, and the New York Post counted 17 lies in 15 minutes. That might be a new world record.
This week with CNN, if you saw it, you may have watched it yourself. He set quite the record. The New York Post reports this. In a brief 17 minutes, Biden told 15 lies, nearly a lie a minute. From whoppers about the economy to prevarications on Israel, Biden spun a fantasy land of a presidency that voters know is false. So what we want to do is put it all together, all right? So on screen, you'll see all 15 that the New York Post lists here. I don't know what you favor, Martha. Lie one is I've created 15 million jobs since I've been president. Problem is that all those jobs came back because COVID went away and you had the vaccine. How about number 8? Inflation was 9% when I came to office.
Nope.
That's right. And on it went. There it is right there. 9% when I came to office.
1.4% when.
Yeah, and let's face it, guys, it's one thing for Fox News to point out what Biden has done here, but even on CNN, they were honing in on one part of the interview in particular where Joe Biden insists that the economy is great. The American people just don't get it yet.
Life is like, and they can't buy a bigger house because of mortgage rates. They still, when you talk about grocery prices. Right. And so the president has to be careful here. That sounds like somebody in Washington telling people you're wrong. And whatever your party is, voters don't process it that way. They don't like that.
Definitely don't like being told they're wrong because it's how they're actually experiencing the economy personally.
The inflation drag, the cost of living drag is still giant out in America, and they don't like people in Washington telling them they're wrong.
Yeah, that's CNN. So Akash, let's pick it up right there because you guys at Americans for Prosperity, you actually own Bidenomics.com, where you can see exactly what's going on in this economy. And it certainly runs contrary to what the president keeps insisting on a daily basis.
It's absolutely mind-boggling that they just keep owning that actually the economy is fantastic. And they're owning it so much that they're trotting out Kamala Harris to campaign across the country for Bidenomics, which is in one sense fitting because she's exactly the spokesperson that Bidenomics deserves. But we didn't just launch Bidenomics.com. We are actually launching a bus tour to hold President Biden and the lawmakers that voted for his agenda accountable. We're going to have 500 events all across this country, and thousands of people are going to come out to join these events because they are feeling exactly what those commentators were talking about, which is that the economy is broken, things are too expensive, and this president and his administration and those who voted for his agenda simply do not care.
That bus tour sounds fun. Maybe we should do a live roundtable on the bus tour on one of the stops, Akash. That would be a blast.
Come join us. We'll be out there, Larry.
Andy, this whole don't believe what's going on in your bank account. Don't believe what's going on with your grocery bill. Don't believe what's going on when you fill up the gas tank. The economy's strong, you idiot. I don't know. Is that working with your voters?
It's insult to injury is what it is, Larry. I think that I believe that full employment in this country is unemployment with an unemployment rate around 5%. And if I'm not mistaken, it's over 6% right now. That's the reality of the situation. People are having a hard time just funding the necessities of life, particularly AMAC members who live on fixed incomes. They're enduring the cuts to Medicare Advantage, so their health is at risk. And now you've got this clown in the White House telling people it's not what you see, it's not what you think. Listen to me because the economy is great. People are insulted and it makes them mad, and I think it motivates them to get out and vote.
Yeah, Sarah, it's not like they can say how great things are in a tangible way, so they sort of have to throw out statistics and just say, trust us. But the real dangerous thing about that is not only do the American people feel something different, but it opens up a huge lane for your opponent.
Exactly. And Americans are sick of being gaslit, both sides of the party, even the non-voters. We see it in our tanks. We see it at the pump. We see it in our carts, our grocery bills, our utilities. Everything is so much more expensive under Joe Biden, and he can't take ownership for it. It's disgusting. How is he supposed to get voters to come out and force for him if we know that it's going to be just another expensive 4 years? Americans can't afford Joe Biden. It's that plain and simple.
That's a great line, by the way. The campaign should pick up on that. You can't afford 4 more years. Rush Limbaugh used to often refer to low information voters. And I know it sounds insulting, but what he means is voters who aren't paying attention the way we are. You know, they're not news junkies. They're not politics junkies. They're not in it, right? They have lives, normal lives. When Joe Biden and the White House and other surrogates say inflation was 9% when Joe Biden took over, it's an absolute lie. But do voters remember that, Sarah? Is it, can we rely on their real lived experience? After all, that was 3.5 years ago.
Well, think about it this way. Take the cost of living per city. DC is significantly more expensive than the rest of the country. So a $150 grocery bill for us is just as expensive for cost of living that's, for a small family in rural Idaho. Like, we're all seeing the brunt of it. But many Americans outside the Beltway don't understand what that means for their pocketbook. Like, we're just cashing out dollar after dollar after dollar. But that's all they think about. They don't know the minutia. They don't look at the bills. They don't see how much money is appropriated to what. So the fact that Joe Biden is using our money so recklessly and realizing it's actually very insulting, because he thinks that everyone else in the country won't recognize it and won't vote against him for it because they're not paying attention.
But Akash, there is a learning curve here when it comes to things like inflation. 9% inflation 3 years ago. Now it's 3%. People might instinctively, buy what Karine Jean-Pierre is saying and say, see, it's gone down 6%, without realizing it's gone up an additional 3%. It's not going up as much, but it's still going up, inflation is, because these numbers stack on top of each other. How do you do that? I mean, there does need to be some education so people get it.
Well, there does, Larry. You're right in the way you're describing it, but people don't care about stuff like that. Prices are up almost 20% since Joe Biden took office. People don't assess the health of the economy based on pie charts from the White House. They assess it based on their own pocketbooks, their ability to make ends meet. Prices are up and wages have not kept pace. Now, of course, the media is not going to tell a fair story. And if your viewers, if conservatives are concerned about doing this, they have to understand that no one else is coming to do it for us. This is what Americans for Prosperity does. That's what this bus tour is going to be. That's what our activists go out and do every single day, 365 days a year, election year, not an election year, knocking doors, making phone calls, holding lawmakers accountable, and telling the truth about the track record of Joe Biden and the Democrats on the economy. If you're concerned that this message is not going to resonate, get up and do something about it. Join us at Americans for Prosperity and help spread the word yourself.
Yeah, and Andy, it really goes back, I guess, to that great question Ronald Reagan asked in 1980, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Now, if people really think about 4 years ago, they're middle of the pandemic, right? And that's where you get the 15 million jobs lost and all of these other things that Biden's now saying he did, when it was really just, okay, the pandemic's over, people can go back to work. That's the question. When people look back at the Trump presidency, do they think of those last horrible 9 months under the pandemic and the lockdown? Or do they think about, well, what was really kind of a prosperous term?
I think that they believed in the prosperity that Trump brought to the table, all the new entrepreneurs that were created, particularly among minorities. I think voters, and particularly AMAC members, and I'm a little biased here, admittedly, have no problem remembering the good times, the good economic times that Trump brought to the table during his presidency. I think when it comes to Biden, people realize how they were lied to during the pandemic starting in 2021. Take the vaccine. It won't hurt you. Well, now we've seen a major vaccine manufacturer yank their product from the market. So I think this resonates with people, and I think it brings back all the lies that this administration has been telling American voters over the last 4 years.
Yeah, a very good point, and we'll let it be the last one. But it is. I will just finish with this. It's amazing to think that Donald Trump pretty much spent the entire week in a courtroom facing criminal charges, and he had a very good week politically. That really says something about where we are right now. That's it. Thank you, Roundtable. Always doing a great job pushing back against conventional wisdom in this Washington, D.C. market.